We must accept our responsibility in showing them something out of their comfort zone.
Is the rise of the gender-neutral generation resulting in blurred lines in fashion? For centuries, children in the Western world, regardless of gender, wore white dresses until the age of 6. It was only in the mid-19th century that color was introduced. Is social experimentation, political correctness, and pop culture enticing us to embrace gender neutrality? In the fashion industry, the trend for androgynous style clothing has been growing over the past few years. If you're not familiar with the term, you might be tempted to believe that androgynous fashion is a new concept. However, the origin of this fashion can be traced back to the 17th century. Now, in order to understand these developments, we first must understand where the trend started. On today's show, two leading South African creators will help us unpack the world of fluid fashion. Tiaan Schutte, founder of Creative Revolt and one of the most sought-after art directors here in the country. Tiaan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
And then we've got Aziz Jacobs, editor-in-chief at Jacobs Man, previously fashion director at Men's Health. Aziz, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Now, gentlemen, do you feel that the South African clothing industry is adopting gender-neutral fashion rapidly now?
I don't necessarily think, I'm of the opinion that doesn't rest with the retailer so much as the consumer. I think our consumers aren't adapting quick enough and not like going out looking for what they need. They confine themselves to their departments or their gender roles within stores. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think people aren't shopping around enough and sticking to their own genders. Go look for things.
Yeah, and I think it's within the space, the digital space, like especially in South Africa, gender-neutral fashion, I think it's not as outspoken as it should be. And obviously we need to first create a platform, like a marketing platform, in order for retailers to adopt to that trend. Because unfortunately it is a niche market, like I said, especially in South Africa, because I mean, we have only so much stores to pick and choose from. You know, we don't have a big variety where we can just go to and shop like we want. We don't have a lot of choices. So whatever choices we have at the moment, we kind of like just so comfortable in just doing our shopping, whether it's going to the store or online.
When weighing business objective to trying to be inclusive as a business or a retailer, what are we seeing evolve there? Are retailers trying to be inclusive enough, or do we prioritize business or business objectives over inclusion?
In South Africa, in my opinion, obviously I think it's more about the business objective than anything else, because obviously we have to think long term, you have to think of employment, you have to think of the economy. So yes, like I said, once the gender neutral space has expanded enough in South Africa, I think the more education done around the subject, it kind of will educate people more about what it really means, gender neutral, you know, and it should be inclusive of the fashion industry.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to my shopping, I like the freedom of fashion, of also giving the consumer the opportunity to buy whatever they want to, and not just labeling them to say that this is for men or women, because I have the freedom to go to whatever section I want to, if I like a jacket or a pair of trousers or shoes or whatever.
Absolutely. With that said, the clothing industry is known to be a safe haven for the LGBT community. Why is this, and what do you think, or do you think that the industry is fully accepting?
I think people find a little bit of a solace in fashion because it's a way to express yourself and a way to show your inner colors without saying anything, like verbally. And you can play around with it because it's never stagnant. You can change it up as much as you want. And of course, I think that for any creative or someone in the LGBTQ community that's looking to express themselves and have like found their voice within, or have had the freedom to come out, what a great way to express that and play around with that, just to find your inner self in a sense. So you can play around and then you find your happy medium, and then still play around from there, like meaning it's ever evolving and never stopping.
Absolutely. Staying on the topic of business though, you mentioned that it shouldn't be a niche, the topic of discussion shouldn't be that this is still a niche thing, but are retailers, is there enough representation in retail stores here in the country?
Well, absolutely not. Not at retail giants, no. Like I said, once again, it comes down to the whole business development sector of any retailer, and also if there's a much bigger market, trust me, I mean, every single retailer will grab that space and own it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're not there yet, and that's why, like, thanks to pop culture, thanks to the digital space, it gave us the opportunity to kind of send the word out there and voice about these, creations, the evolution of where fashion is going.
Absolutely, absolutely. For smaller brands or designers trying to get onto the market, we can bark as loudly as we want. We can bark as loud as we want, but if opportunities are not being created, then the growth of the industry is stagnated. Are we seeing enough opportunities being created? Is the media trying hard enough, or are businesses trying hard enough?
Not necessarily. They think the big businesses are in it for the money, and the smaller brands usually get overseen. There isn't a big helping hand in or locally in South Africa for young designers or platforms that actually boost them. There is a few nice initiatives, but it's few and far between, and also people are trying to get great minds into bigger brands in order for them to make as much money as possible, and not necessarily growing or developing local culture. So no, not enough has been done, and not just in the LGBTQ or androgynous fashion sense, like I think across the board.
So whose role is it? And I want us to talk about that for a second. If we can zoom in, trends and representation once again. The role of the media, the role of society, and then the role of big business or big brands. What is their specific role, and how can they assist in moving that segment of the market forward?
I think even though for me, like, I kind of always look at completely two different lights of any situation. And if the market, the gender neutral market, is still very niche in South Africa, even if it is so, I think we need to give thanks to those designers like Tian. Like, they are opening doors for upcoming brands or designers that's heading up the gender neutral space in the future. So I think it obviously has to start somewhere. Absolutely. And it needs to start with these niche markets, and without them, the evolution of the gender neutral will not happen. So it needs to start somewhere. Absolutely. So whether it's small for a couple of years, I think it's still developing, and that's a positive light already, that the word is out there, people are knowing. And I mean, the Gen Z, that they are growing up. If I think of my little nephews, then don't like labels,
Talking about Gen Zs, do you think that they are driving the conversation online?
I'm not sure if they're going to be driving it, but they definitely open up to the opportunity of what I can see from friends and family and online.
Okay, absolutely. Tian, you spoke about expression earlier, and how this is not only a safe space or safe platform, but also a place of expression. But let's get real. Is it profitable? Because often we see a lot of noise. We see everybody trying to say, pay attention to me, pay attention to what I'm doing, pay attention to what I'm trying to say. But does that translate into being profitable, or is it just gimmicky?
Sometimes not. Sometimes the big expressions would be seen as a gimmicky thing. It makes for incredible images and beautiful campaigns. So by all means, then you need to express yourself wherever possible, but you must keep profitability in mind, especially for the young designers to grow. So you get the young designers, and I think most of us have incurred that little mishap. When starting out, you want to express yourself. It's the best collection no one's ever seen, and it doesn't sell, and everyone sits crying. So you need to find the balance between the two. It's very important to express yourself, but still make a profit, to have your company and your brand grow, to enable you to keep on doing this for years.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Otherwise, it would be a short stint.
Yeah. I know that there's been a big focus, especially this past few months, on what's coming next, what's happening next, what the next trends are. But a large part of the trends within the segment has been influenced by the club scene. We haven't seen a club scene for the past year with lockdown. So where do you think the influence for upcoming trends are going to come from?
I think our lockdown situation is going to be the trend. I think we shouldn't be looking at what's coming next. I think it's how are we adjusting what we have. Money is currently limited. People's jobs are limited. I think take your current wardrobe and pivot that into something. I think lots of people have reconsidered the way that they dress and express themselves and what they're comfortable in. So I think we should not necessarily look ahead to see what's coming next. I think we should cleverly approach our current wardrobes and situations.
Absolutely.
And then pivot from there.
Absolutely.
Just to touch on what Tian said, which is obviously a fact, and I agree with that, because that's also where brands are starting to tap in. It's about the sustainability and the recycle of fashion. And the education around there is that whether you support local fashion or reuse styles or wear your friend's jacket, you know, that's where all the inspiration comes from. And I think also big brands are noticing it and they know that if this trend is running and if it's current, they need to run with the current trend. And that's when I think sustainability and the recycle factor comes in, which is very important. It's a big trend for 2021.
Absolutely.
In fashion and in skincare.
I want to unpack the role of media, Aziz, because you come from that, you know, from that world. You've been part of the group of people that really drives the narrative and drives the conversation. But how much is the media doing? Because we on one end of the spectrum, we're trying to force the retailer's hand and we're saying, listen to us and include us. But the media, how much are they doing, again, in terms of driving the narrative?
I think, in my opinion, there's like a 50-50 split. It depends on when it comes to, for example, fashion weeks in South Africa, we do have the media support. They are backing the young talent, they are backing local talent, so that is very positive. But from a print perspective, which we're still running, and I think which it's becoming a luxury now in South Africa, it's very difficult because coming from a media background and the way you have to speak to your audience and cater, you obviously have to cater for your needs, for their needs, because at the same time we were trying to sell a magazine and we have to cater for their interests and how we speak about trends. They coming back to us and we have to obviously voice it in the most diplomatic way as possible. So it's a very difficult subject to kind of introduce to a very straightforward consumer. You know, yes, he might see, but he will not understand what gender neutral is based on. You know, it goes more than just one article. Because if I look at the consumer, at Men's Health, one of our biggest selling fashion issues was the mix and match. And that's just about simplifying their wardrobes, using 10 key items and creating 20 or 30 looks. So it's things put together for them so easily that they can kind of take the magazine and literally go to the store. We used to get message upon messages asking where to get this jacket, how can I get these looks, etc., etc. So I'm just kind of just reminding you how the consumer thinks, and still in South Africa because it's a real thing. And then obviously us as experts needs to do way more than just having one collection, one fashion collection or one article. You know, it goes beyond that.
That's a funny thing because we're also basically on the retail side of it. We're trying to sell a product or a format to a viewer, but we must accept our responsibility in showing them something out of their comfort zone. So they don't even necessarily need to follow it. But I mean, as soon as you have someone think about a certain subject or someone wearing a dress, and then you'll have these old guys coming in, can't believe the guy just wore that, or can't, but they noticed it and they saw it and they're thinking about it, and it opens up a conversation or a narrative. Even if some of the androgynous people, or if a lady wearing man's clothes or vice versa, if people are exposed to that, that opens up a conversation and people grow used to it and accept it, or they dislike it, but luckily they saw it and they can make up their mind, their own minds.
Are we being consistent enough though? Because you'll see random flare-ups and you'll see something in the media or on the news, and you know it's a conversation for a day or two and then we go silent for a long time. Is there enough consistency? Because you want it to stick, you want it to be on the minds of your viewers.
It is, and I think it's for me, the most impactful conversations that could be had is between two people, necessarily off screen or not necessarily in media. If we're having a conversation amongst ourselves, something is happening. There's a little bit of a movement or a step forward. The media sometimes don't necessarily get it right, or they push it too far, almost like an intervention on whoever is on the other side. But it helps. It sparks a conversation. We're having a conversation about this now. Yeah, so I think it's the subtle notes of conversation between normal people on everyday
Absolutely.
platforms, which is more
Absolutely.
important.
I want to point out something. We every once in a while we'll see on a runway, in the midst of a menswear collection, a guy will come out to the runway wearing a dress, and the message that we are putting out there is that that's androgyny.
People have been cross-dressing or wearing different genders' clothes for ages. The nice thing for me is leaving a little bit of a thought trail afterwards. If you send someone down the runway and you can't necessarily figure out if it's a boy or a girl wearing a boy or a girl's clothes, that's where the narrative actually should be lying, and that's what androgyny is at the end.
Absolutely.
It's just leaving that little bit of a question mark. It doesn't matter then, really.
Absolutely.
If it's a beautiful piece of clothing on a beautiful person.
What is androgyny? Again, we've been saying it's a man in a dress or a man in high heels, but what is it?
Just to tap on what Tian said, so it's so important then it comes back to the designer and what is his message and story, because sometimes the designers, to be honest, get it wrong. In South Africa, I'm sorry to say, I've been to enough fashion weeks, and sometimes they do put the man in the dress and he walks down the runway and then it confuses everybody, especially, what's the story behind it? For me, it's always what's the story, what's your creation, what message are you trying to send? That's important, and that's how we have to start, especially if you want to create these beautiful designs, and how it's going to reflect on society or what kind of message they receive.
Gender fluid fashion in 2021 and beyond, where do you see this heading?
I think it's not going to matter as much as we're moving forward, because we are a growing culture of accepting more people, and we've got pronouns for more people. We aren't as phased as we used to be seeing a guy in women's clothes and vice versa. It's become a part of our culture, and it shouldn't matter that much. It's a very important thing, and it's something very sensitive. So not that we as a collective do not matter, but I think it's starting to become more normal and more accepted. And I would just love to see more androgynous fashion done really well, without pushing a boundary, or of course push a boundary, but I mean overstepping a boundary into something distasteful.
Yeah, exactly.
And where do you see the industry heading?
It's progressing at the moment, and I think, to be honest, and all speaking, especially in South Africa, it's still going to take time. We still need time to grow. We need proper understanding about the gender neutral idea of fashion, and at the same time, is it like, are we trying to label a certain group of people again? It's so many different topics and so many explanations, but the only thing for me is just like, there's one thing that we should understand, is you give the freedom for people to wear what they want, and that's the most important thing. So what is their taboo? It's because it's the guy in the dress, but it's not so much a taboo if you see a female in a suit, it's so many different things to consider. But I think it's growing, the conversation is there. This online space is giving us this opportunity, and it's not going to go anywhere but just evolving. So acceptance will come and it will grow.
Yeah, I also think it's quite important. I've out of personal experience, I move in a very safe space, and I dress the way that I dress, but I make a decision every time I do so by accepting the consequences thereof as well. And I've been called names and shouted at, but that is also a part of the intervention on the people. And you make a conscious decision. So if someone chooses to actually not get involved, but chooses androgyny or chooses to dress the way that they like to, you must accept the consequences, but be strong.
Okay, Tian, in closing, I want to look at a case study of a local brand that has adapted gender neutrality in their stores.
Yeah, I think what Zara did they brought out a gender neutral collection, and they packaged and filmed it that way, which is clever. I think our stylists and designers know it has been possible, and it has been in stores for quite a bit. It's just the way it has been packaged, but it's great. So it shows people, and it makes them more comfortable to cross over the gender line. So I quite like that idea. But I think throughout the years, I've bought a few things in a female section, and I know some of my girlfriends have bought stuff in a male section. So I think we should stop limiting ourselves to the sections, and yeah, go buy something that you really like.
Oh, I love
Exactly.
that. I love that. Final words to our viewers.
Fashion is such an expressive form, and I think it gives us the voice and the opportunity to open platforms like this. And it's only evolving, and we start with gender neutral, and I'm so excited to see how we're going to unpackage this topic, and where South Africa and how South Africa is going to play on this. So I'm thinking positively, as long as we have the freedom of expressing ourselves and of giving us the opportunity to wear what we want, we're good. So I am staying positive.
Some profound insights from two of the leading voices in the country. Now, today proves that the industry is evolving, and the hope of its growth lies in your and my hands if we continue the narrative, if we play our part, and if we take action. Tian Skutter, Aziz Jacobs, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.